about the greatness of the Lord? Can you just lift up some thanksgiving to Him now? Has He been good to you? Let's just thank Him for that. Lord, we love you, God. You brought us through so much. And for those who might find themselves in a difficult situation, we can lift up our heads and we can say, thank you, God, because you're bringing me through this even now. Great are you, Lord. Come on, let's give the Lord a praise today. God is good, isn't He? Yes, He is. Man, that's some good worship, wasn't it? You can be seated. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Paul. I've been here this summer. I want to thank Matt and Carrie and this church here. Thank you so much. It's not a small deal to hand over the pulpit on a Sunday, and so thanks for putting that trust. And so anyways, I told him, I think it was a week or two ago, it's like, I just get to preach and go, and you're going to come back and have to clean up the mess. So, it's one of those things. But no, thank you so much. And as a church, thank you for investing in your pastor and his family here. This time that they've taken, I know has been very valuable for them. And it takes a while. I've taken a sabbatical, and it takes a couple of weeks sometimes you get a 2-week vacation, and that's great, and it's awesome. And most people, I understand, just get a 2, and you think, well, man, I don't get 2 or 3 months sabbatical, so, but you got to understand, when you're a pastor, you're so invested. It takes a good 2 weeks to disconnect and just to be able to think freely and just focus in on your family, yourself, your own relationship with the Lord, and then you can enjoy some time. And then about 2 weeks before coming back, you start re-engaging, He's not quite done with the sabbatical yet, but he's here. So, you start re-engaging, and so you need some time in between there for that investment time that is the intention of a sabbatical like this. And so I hope you understand the blessing that it is, not just to him and his family, but also that it will be for you as a church body. So I want to thank you for that investment in the Ellises. And so, but man, it's been such a great summer, great time. This is sermon number 12 here that I've been able to bring to Hope Crossing. So it's been such a great time. Thanks for being so warm. You guys are fantastic. What a great family you are to one another, how open you've been to me and my family, and Martin and Amy and this worship team and their families. So thank you so much. Give yourselves a hand here. Can you do that? I would, but it would make a loud noise in the mic. So, all right. Well, today, as the big finale, I'm going to be preaching out of a few different passages, actually. And so, but talking about Jesus and feeding the 5,000. Jesus fed 5,000 people. Well, kind of. We'll get into that. He did absolutely, but it's a whole lot more than just 5,000. Anyways, let's get on with this. So today is the one when Jesus feeds the 5,000. This is mentioned in every gospel. Not every gospel mentions every episode of Jesus' life. But when you put them all together, you get a good picture of his life. But the feeding of the 5,000 is in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew 14, Luke 9, Mark 6, John 6. And we're going to jump around a bit through a few of these accounts here. So let me just give you some context about this, what led up to this. So John the Baptist was Jesus' cousin, right? And his ministry was concurrent with Jesus's, and he was kind of that herald proclaiming. Jesus talked about John in Matthew 11. We got a few scriptures here. It says John the Baptist, Jesus is talking about John the Baptist was the Elijah to come, that prophet proclaiming the Messiah, the herald that was prophesied about in the Old Testament. Malachi 3:1, I will send my messenger who will prepare the way before me. And Isaiah 40, a voice of one calling in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord. And John the Baptist fulfilled all of these prophecies here and many more. Jesus' cousin here. Well, he was arrested by Herod. Herod was that Roman appointed king over Israel, that ruler. And he was arrested by Herod, and Long story short, he was executed. He was beheaded by Herod here, and his death affected Jesus very deeply. I don't live close to my cousins anymore, but if they died, I would go there, and or especially in this kind of a way, it would be tragic. It would affect me deeply, and Jesus was no different. His death affected him very deeply. He really wanted to go to a quiet place to grieve just for a little while. John 6 said that he went to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee to get away. So he was on one side teaching the parables to the people, the parables by the sea. Then he left. I think this was last week we talked about this. He left to the other side to set this demon-possessed guy free. And then he came right back and he healed the sick woman and Jairus' daughter. And now he's going across again to a different far shore. But he had some kind of a break because in the meantime, it talks about in Mark 6 how he sent out the 12, and empowered them to do all kinds of amazing things and to share the gospel message. And I'm sure that was for more than an afternoon. Not sure how long they were gone, but really, I don't think it matters. But in that time period, somewhere in there, Jesus learned about John the Baptist's death and his execution here. And he really wanted to get away for a little while. But before he had a chance, his disciples come back to him. And they reported all that happened. Mark chapter 6 says, the disciples came back as Jesus was planning to leave. Like, I imagine, when you read it, it's like, oh my goodness, Jesus, this happened and that happened. It's kind of like a kid coming back from an event or a movie. We have 4 kids. 3 are in the house right now, but if they have a fun time, maybe they go to a friend's house or they go to a church event or youth camp or even a movie or something like that, and they want to come back and they want to tell you everything. Have you ever been in that position when you have kids and they come back, they want to tell you everything, but really you're in the middle of something and it's kind of something important and they're all excited and they're just wanting to share with you, and then this happened and then that happened and then, oh wow, it was so amazing and this, and you want to be interested because you love your kids. But at the same time, am I the only one? Am I the bad dad? Am I the only one? I can't hear you, so you have to be a little bit louder in your back and forth interactions here, okay? Remember, that's okay, We're not Catholic, you just be out there with it, all right? So anyways, but you're in the middle of something, you really love your kids, and so you're just like, And so anyways, some of you have been in that position, but maybe some of you have been in that position of grieving, but people still wanted to be around you, but honestly, you just wanted to be alone, friends. They just want to help you. They want to comfort you. They have wonderful intentions. So maybe we're patient with them, but sometimes too much company can make it a little more difficult to grieve properly. And I wonder if that's what Jesus was experiencing here, Let's look at Matthew chapter 14, verse 3 is where it starts. Matthew chapter 14. Let's just start at verse 13. Sorry, not verse 3. So that's kind of the context. And so he's been back and forth teaching people and stuff. He sends the disciples away, and while they're gone, he learns about John, his cousin's death. And then the disciples come back, and they're telling him all this stuff. But what Jesus is really wanting right now is just to be alone. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. We know from Mark's account the disciples were with him, but he slipped away. He tried to slip away privately, trying not to be noticed. Solitary. That word solitary is uninhabited, desolate, lonely. He wanted to go to a solitary, desolate, lonely place just to be alone with his Father. We see him do this a few times in the Gospels for prayer. This time, he's motivated by grief. I mean, can you see and appreciate the humanity here of Christ? Throughout this summer, what I really wanted to do in my study about Jesus, there's all the teachings of Jesus, which are wonderful and amazing and life-giving and all of this, but I really wanted to focus on Jesus the person and his interactions with people. So we can just see this down-to-earth, awesome Jesus that I really can relate with, who, better than that, who I really think he relates with me, he understands me. But so I hope we can see and appreciate his humanity here, how deeply he loved. particularly John. So he finally gets away, only to find that he's not alone. Going on in that same verse, hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns here, because they'd been following him all around. And he went across the sea to minister to the demon-possessed guy. He comes back, and the crowds are just waiting on him. And he had just left them, and so they just won't leave him alone. And he really wants to withdraw to this private, solitary place. But when the people heard about it, they followed him there, and they wouldn't let him get away. Now, I don't know what I'd be doing right now. I would probably be the guy just like, you know what, Peter, I love people, I really do, but let's just act like we don't see them. And let's just set sail for another port. You've done that in the grocery store, haven't you? Right? Yeah, I don't do that. No, I'm just kidding. I've done that, but never, not to any of you. But anyways, Peter, let's just act like we don't see them, and let's just sail away again, you know? I mean, he did try to slip away privately from the people, and I can imagine him seeing the people here. He's grieving for his cousin that was executed in a horrible way, and I can imagine him seeing the people and just kind of going, you know, maybe a slight smile, reminding himself, this is why I'm here. These people, they're why I'm here. I'm grieving for my cousin. I'm trying to slip away to a private place. That's where I really want to be, but, you know, they're not leaving me alone. And instead of just looking at that as an offense, instead of looking at that as, oh my goodness, ministry would be so much easier if it wasn't for all the people, you know, that kind of stuff. He just, this is why, I think he reminded himself, this is why I'm here. Kind of like the Samaritan woman at the well. You know, we talked about that several weeks ago, a long time. Toward the beginning of our time here, the disciples went to buy food, and they returned, and Jesus wasn't hungry anymore. Why? He said, because my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. And maybe now he's saying, my rest and my healing comes from serving. I didn't come to be served, but I came to serve people. There's people who serve during church while this is going on, you know, and that's a way, man, some people, they don't serve during church because they're like, well, then I don't hear the sermon, and then I don't get fed, right? And it's like, well, there's a feeding you can find in serving that you can't find here. Now, not to say that don't ever come here, right? That would be out of bounds. That wouldn't be right. But when we serve, we're fed, we're filled, you know. Sure, it's a sacrifice, but God pours into our lives in greater measure. Amen. So that's a good point, but that's not the sermon. All right, so moving on. Matthew 14, verse 14. So he tried to get away. The crowds, they heard about this, so they're like, oh, no, you don't. And so they're following him, right? Verse 14, when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. He began to minister to them while inwardly he was hurting. You see that? While inwardly he was grieving and he was hurting. Then he took it a step further. You know, I've been a part of some late services, I'm a Pentecostal background. I've been a part of some really long Sunday night services, all right? And it just goes on and on and on. Prayer time went on for hours. A great time, right? But always glad when the pastor finally said, it's been a great night, good night, you know, and close the service down and dismiss the people so that we could go home to eat and to rest. And it's like, oh, this has been so great, but I'm so tired, thank you. We're ending the service, that's awesome, right? You know, but this is where the story gets good. Verse 15, as evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, this is a remote place and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the village and buy themselves some food. Now let's switch over now. We're going to switch over to Mark's account. Mark, I don't have it marked properly. I don't have Mark marked. Mark chapter 6. This is a solitary place, so send the crowds away so they can go buy food. Mark chapter 6, verse 37, because it's all in all of them, right? And every gospel has this account, so we're just going to flip over and pick up where Mark picks off right here. But he answered, you give them something to eat. Then they said to him, that would take more than a half year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give them to eat? How many loaves do you have, he asked. Go and see. And when they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Probably said a little sarcastically. So the amount that it would take, according to the Bible, is 200 denarii, okay? By today's standard, that's almost $3,500. Now, they may have had that with them. I doubt it, but they may have, but not that they had that, but maybe they just estimated that it would take, counting, there's this many people here to feed them all is going to take a whole lot of money. And so, typically we don't walk around with enough cash to feed thousands of people at one time here, right? But probably said sarcastically, we have 5, and what they did, they found a boy there, who had all this stuff. And so anyways, we have 5 loaves of bread, and maybe sarcastically added, and 2 fish. That makes all the difference, right? And so isn't that what we do, though? God puts a dream in our hearts. God gives us, I want you to do this. Or it feels like he's telling us something like that. So we start doing the math, and we discover, well, it's impossible. It can't happen. Practicality takes over, and all of a sudden, it's too expensive. We can't do this. There's no time. So we set the dream aside for something more practical, more of a sure thing, and settle for boring. When we moved from being a youth pastor in Oklahoma, all right, we were there for a long time in Oklahoma. My Oklahoma sister right here, yeah. So we were youth pastors in Oklahoma for quite some time. And we moved from that to being lead pastors in southern Missouri, and we made exactly half the salary from moving from youth pastor to lead pastor here, and it wasn't supposed to work. It wasn't supposed to. I'm doing the math, and I'm just simply saying, well, no. I mean, I understand that that's all they can do, and I understand that this isn't all about money. However, I'm looking practically. It's like, we have kids and all of this stuff, and it's just not going to work. And Vicki is a lot more spiritual than I am. She has a lot more faith, and she said, you know what? If this is a God thing, then it's going to work. So let's do this. And so the math didn't add up, but we really felt like God said go. I finally realized, she's right. And so, which is normally the case. But he not only took care of us, he not only met all of our needs, but we ended up even paying off debt that we couldn't get paid off when we made twice as much. Weird, right? It's not supposed to work like that. So the disciples started counting the people and counting their resources, and it just didn't add up. They found 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish. John's account said the food belonged to a young boy. He was most likely there actually it probably wasn't his lunch. That would be a weird lunch. Wouldn't it? Think about it. 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish for one young boy right there, What you got for lunch there? That's weird. But he was probably there to sell food. Once again, they had no idea that Jesus could feed all these people. When they were in the middle of the Sea of Galilee in the storm, remember, and they felt like, man, one more wave and we're sunk, literally. And so they said, Jesus, get up, wake up. Don't you care? We're going to drown. Do something. They weren't thinking miracle at the time. Because after he did the miracle, they were amazed. What they were thinking is, grab a bucket and help us out here, Cup your hands, something. Get the water out of the boat here. They had seen him do amazing things like bring a dead girl back to life, but they saw no solution to the challenge that Jesus was putting before them now. God's brought you through so many things, hasn't he? But the next challenge we see, it's like, oh man, this is it. We're sunk now, and we forget so easily all the things that he's brought us through. Now we're looking at feeding 10 to 15,000 people. Yeah, it says that there were 5,000, but that was just the men. Did not include women and children. It says 5,000 people, but that was just the men. Didn't include women and children. Jesus already had a plan. He knew what he was going to do, but the disciples didn't have a clue. I have kind of a backstory leading to a point, I promise. I've drugged Martin into a few things with me throughout our friendship. We did 2 years ago today. I looked up, those Facebook memories. 2 years ago today, I was running a Ragnar relay. It's a 200-mile relay. It's me and 5 other people. And Martin was originally on the team. with that to run it with us. He got injured during training, and so we had to find a replacement for that. Wasn't as fun without him running, but he was still with us. But anyways, it was from Copper Mountain to Aspen. 6 of us up and down over Vail Pass, all that kind of stuff, raising money for urban outreach in 5 Points. I don't know if you've heard about that great ministry. But it's a challenge that Martin and I got ourselves into. But when we were training for that, I don't know about Martin, but I'm thinking, I can't do this. This is like one of my legs was running from the bottom to the top of Vail Pass, not down at all, only up the whole way, and over 30-some miles altogether. So we had some work to do here. Mornings, spent running long distances, spent running hills. There were 2-3 runs a day, sometimes getting ready for something like that. Wasn't easy, wasn't always fun. I've ran some marathons. I convinced Martin to do a Tough Mudder with me, and brought him. That was nuts. I wish I had pictures, but I forgot to put them on my little stick. We looked very good in the photos, though. Both of the Ragnar and the Tough, just trust me. But I camping, Martin's not a camper, but I just drug him in, that kind of thing. So we did them well enough, but we had never ran anything like those things before, Tough Mudder, Ragnar, stuff like that. So as we go, we were discovering more of what we were capable of doing, Jesus' disciples were also in this time of discovery. It turns out, well, we did it. We ran it. It was great. It was amazing. Some high points of our lives and stuff like that. But we didn't think we could do it. But we were in this time of discovery, what we could do. Jesus' disciples, I want you to see, as they were with him, as they were following him, they were also in a time of discovery, discovering who Jesus was, what he was capable of. And I want to invite you into that same realm of discovery. If we've been serving the Lord for a long time, we kind of get into this groove. Oh, I know the Lord. I know the Lord, Really? This infinite God who is in our finite little minds, everything about him, right? I mean, the disciples were with him personally here. They walked alongside him. They shared stories around a campfire together and all this other kind of stuff. And they were constantly in this mode of discovering who this guy was. And it started with, I think this guy might be somebody, and so he's calling me to follow him. I think I will. To then, I'm pretty sure this guy's somebody, to eventually all the way to, okay, he's definitely somebody, to that declaration, he is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And it was this time of discovery, and you might already be in that, he is the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's where that's that saving faith that we come to know Christ with there, But throughout our time of discipleship, man, let it be a time of discovery of, man, who he is, how he's working in our lives. And when we face a challenge, it's not this, oh, we're sunk. Have we forgotten who he is? Or are we're not discovering any more of who he is and what he can do in our lives. You know what I mean? Are you with me? Okay, some of you. When life throws a challenge at us, man, I want to respond by giving God an opportunity to work. How are you going to do this one, God? How are you going to work this situation out? I don't know. I can't see a way, but I know you well enough to know that you got a way. How are you going to work this one out? Can anyone relate to this? Thank you. What's our typical reaction, though, when we're confronted with a difficult challenge? Not so good. If we're like most people, the reaction's not so good. Could it sometimes be God throwing it at us? I think much of what Jesus did was for the disciples' sake, you see, to teach them about what it means to go through life with him. That, when the disciples said, it's getting late, let's send the crowds away so they can go buy food for themselves, he could have done that. That would have been completely acceptable. Nobody would have thought badly. Jesus, why aren't you feeding us? They wouldn't, I don't think that would have been a thing that came up. I think he would have sent the crowds away. They would have went home. They would have eaten. They would have rested. And so would, after this long day of teaching and healing them, that he was grieving inside, right? Didn't he just want to send them away? And he could have. But no, he threw a challenge at the disciples. He says, you know what? Why don't you give them something to eat? Teaching them about what it means to go through life with him, to help them learn how to respond to life's challenges and even impossible situations, because that was impossible. Here they are doing their signature knee-jerk freak out. We saw them do it on the boat during the storm. We see them doing it right now. We can't feed all these people. We don't have enough money to do that. And I want to take this opportunity to say, you know what? God really doesn't care how much things cost. He really doesn't look at the price tag. Remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about two different kinds of people in the world, and if you were here, one of them was the menu, and there's the one kind of person that looks at what's on the menu, what sounds good first, and then there's the other kind of person that, well, let's look at the cost of it and narrow it down from there, you know? Jesus is the one that looks at what's on the menu and what's good, right? I'm the one that looks at the cost and says, I can't get that, and that, you know? Jesus is the one saying, I don't care how much it costs. If I'm giving you an opportunity, just do it. God has told some of you to give more, but you don't think you can afford it. He wants others to commit more to maybe to missions, you know, and you think, man, I just can't afford it. Others to start a ministry or to start a business, you know, but you think, I just can't afford this. And Jesus told 12 guys to provide food for 10 to 15,000 people. We can't afford this. How's that going to happen? We found a kid who's selling bread. All he has 5 loaves. And 2 fish, you know. Jesus, I know you have good intentions. I know wouldn't it be so great if we could. Boy, does that sound familiar to some of our conversations? Wouldn't it be so great if we could feed all these people, but, you know, we can't. So, oh well, I guess I'm off the hook here, you know. Many people who believe in Jesus and claim to follow him don't think he can do anything beyond what we can see. And how sad is that? And my question is, if we don't think that he can do anything beyond what we can see or do ourselves, why are we following him? You know what I'm saying? Why would we follow him if he could not do anything beyond what we can see and do in ourselves here? It's like we're following him, but we don't think he can lead us anywhere different than where we're already capable of going. You know what I mean? So let's follow the story, see what happened. Let's look at John's account now, John chapter 6, starting in verse 10. Jesus said, have the people sit down. And there was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Men, remember, not just women and children, not including women and children. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. And when they had all had enough to eat, he said to the disciples, gather the pieces that are left over, let nothing be wasted. So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. Look, it doesn't matter how little you think you have. When you offer it to Jesus, he's going to make it sufficient. It's going to be sufficient. He'll make it more than sufficient. They picked up leftovers, more leftovers than what they started with. That's God's math. It's not practical to us. We don't understand it, but it's there. Remember the one about turning water into wine? We talked about this, a couple months ago, I think it was. We turned water into wine. Abundance. They did not need 600 to 900 bottles of wine. That's how much he made, the equivalent of, our equivalent of today's standard bottle. He made 600 and 900. That was way more than what they could or should drink. You know what I'm talking about at this party? But that's what he did, that abundance. And it didn't cost the disciples anything. He took what they had and he made it more. And that's what God wants to do in your life, in our lives today. The point was to meet needs in other people's lives. This isn't a get-rich thing. It was serving people both in supernatural and practical ways. And if you'll commit to doing the practical, he can work the supernatural through you as well. Do you believe that? Do you believe that God is alive, that he's active, and that he can do more than we can do? See, what we can do is the natural, right? And so if he does more than what's natural, that's the definition of being supernatural, right? He can do more than I can do in the natural here. If you commit to doing the natural, you commit to doing what you can do in the practical there, he will take care of the rest. He will work the supernatural as well, just like he did through the disciples here. Following Jesus is this life of discovery. He calls us into this great unknown with him. So, and he invited them into the miracle here. So he had the people sit down. He took the bread. He took the fish. He did the cutting up and the dividing, and the multiplying happened right there. And he gave it to the disciples, and they were a part of that miracle, the passing on of that multiplied, miraculous bread and fish here, you know? Let's throw in another episode of Jesus' life. Moving on here a little bit. Right, it happened right after this. Not going to get too deep into it, but it's the one when Jesus walked on water. Matthew chapter 14. Let's look at Matthew 14 again, because it's right after this episode, basically. He finally gets his time, all right? Finally gets his time. After the feed, he taught the people all day, and then instead of sending them away, it was late, he fed them, 5,000 men, plus their women, and plus the children there. And then he finally gets away here. Let's see, starting in verse 22. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Finally, I get to grieve. I get to pray. Notice how he grieved, by praying. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. There they are again, miracle after miracle after miracle, and they're like, "Oh man, this is it. It's going to kill us. It's got to be a bad ghost, right?" But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Wow. Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You have little faith," he said. "Why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." So he had finished what he started with, started with the intention of just spending some time alone here. He didn't mind the interruption, but what ensued next, the disciples found themselves in another situation where there was rough waters, and it doesn't say that they were in danger, that the boat was going to be swamped like what they had with the storm, and they were in fear for their lives. It just said that they were having a rough go at things, right? That it was like, man, he sent us across here, he's sent us away, and now we're having a rough go of things. And we've talked about this throughout several weeks here, that sometimes when God says to go, it doesn't mean smooth sailing all the time here, right? And so when Jesus saw them, he went out, and other versions say that he was about to pass them by, It's like, you guys are having a rough go of things. I'm doing all right. I'm just going to keep going, all right, But when they saw him, they cried out in fear again, "This is it." And they said, "It's a ghost." And so Jesus, "No, I assure you, it's me. Don't be afraid. It's just me, guys. Just taking a stroll on the water, And so Peter, "Lord, if it's you, call me to come out to you on the water." Think about that. Peter walked on water here. Jesus is saying, with the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus, they've watched him do so much. Now he's saying, "I want you to do this with me." And when he called Peter out on the water, this is this journey of discovery of who this guy is. I don't want you to just watch me walking on the water. Okay, yeah, Peter, go ahead. Come out and do this with me. God wants to use you. He wants to do the miraculous in the world. The biggest miracle he can do is saving a soul. Turning a heart of stone into a heart of flesh, The people coming from death to life. And he wants you to be involved in that miraculous. Come do this with me. They'd been watching him do all kinds of things. Now like a great coach, do it with me. Feed these people. Come out here with me on the water. And he's calling you to do the same. Now we give Peter a hard time, and we look at Jesus. I used to read this all the time with, "You have little faith." He looks at Peter after they get back in the boat. "Why? I can't believe you're doubting still. Just go to the other side of the boat now." That kind. This disgusted Jesus is what I used to read it, how I used to read it. But Peter walked on water. That's amazing, you know? It's like that first step when my kids, I remember T-ball, the first step of T-ball, and I was their coach, and we were the White Sox and stuff because all the little T-ball teams used the major league names, and we didn't get to pick the names. If I'd have been able to pick my own team name, I would have not have picked the White Sox. But anyways, it was the White Sox, and Landon Dayton's out there. This is when he was a little kid, and he goes, and he swings, and he goes right over it, you know? And then he goes again. He's like, okay, I got to lower this down. Good logic. And so he goes, bam, hits the tee, you know, and the ball just kind of falls off like that, you know. And then finally we put him up here, and we get behind him, and together, you know, and we hit the ball, and it went about 8 feet. And it's like, run, you know. And so he goes, but it's like, it wasn't this, you know, I had to do this for you, you know. First time at bat at T-ball, right? No, it was, you hit the ball. It wasn't perfect, was it? But he was little, and it was his first time, and he hit the ball. And I can imagine Jesus is like, you know what? It wasn't pretty, but you walked on water, bro. You know, it's like, and I can imagine almost with a smile on his face, you have little faith. Why did you doubt? But wasn't that awesome? You know, that kind of thing here is how I see Jesus doing this. And that's me, that's my Jesus and stuff. And we'll get to heaven and then we'll have understanding of exactly how it happened. But if I can, speculate a little bit here. But he's calling you to do the same. So if our musicians could go ahead and come up. He's calling you to do the same. Not necessarily feed thousands of people like this. Maybe. Probably not to walk on water literally. But to be a participant with him in what he wants to do on this earth. Do this with me, all right? Don't just watch me. Don't just watch others. I want to work through you. Do this with me. With what he wants to do with you in your home, in your family, in your church, in this neighborhood, this movement of hope, right? So what's the takeaway? This practical application for us. It's this declaration, it's this declaration, it's this ask that we give of the Lord,